Hello and welcome to the launch of Lana Honeyball's first collection of poetry, which is called Flotsam and Jetsam, a half-life of poems. Now, before we talk to Lana herself, I want to quickly just do a little bit of quick housekeeping with you. First of all, and most importantly, the paperback copy and the ebook version are both available right now from Amazon. And they're very easy to find indeed. You just go onto Amazon, you put Lana Honeyball's name in, or Flotsam and Jetsam if you prefer, and you will find it. Until this Friday, February the 5th, you can download the ebook for free. And in return, Lana would really appreciate a review. The magic number of 100 reviews is really important to authors because it means her work will be more visible. So please do, as soon as you've got a minute, when we finish the launch, go onto Amazon, download the ebook for free, enjoy the poetry and leave a review. Also, we have got 3 paperback copies of the collection available, which we will be giving away in the course of this launch. We will ask 3 questions relating to some of the poems we're going to discuss. And the first answer that goes into the chat, we will send a copy of the poetry book to you. So listen carefully. If you have any questions, please do post those in the chat as well, and I will ask Lana as soon as I can. My name is Kate Salisbury, and now let's talk to the poet herself, Lana Honeyball. Lana.
Lol. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks, Jane.
What a day. Yeah. What an absolute day.
Gosh, yeah.
I mean, a lot of excitement and preparation and tiny bit of stress, no doubt, as well, getting ready for this. Just a little. We'll hear a bit more about the process that you've involved yourself in with this, Lana. But first of all, let's find out a little bit about you. Oh, thank you, Emily. Look, we've got a congratulations from Emily.
Thank you.
Who is from the Litopia Writers Colony, which we're both involved in. So please, if you're interested in writing, go to Litopia as well, and you'll see the kind of support that Lana's getting there. Thank you. Some more congratulations coming through. That's wonderful. Lana, so first of all, you are currently in the UK, but your background is in South Africa, and particularly the Port Elizabeth area. Tell us a little bit about life growing up in that part of South Africa.
Well, I didn't actually grow up in Port Elizabeth. I grew up in Johannesburg. And moved to Port Elizabeth when I got married at the tender age of 21, or was it 20? Port Elizabeth is an interest. It's Athol Fugard comes from Port Elizabeth, and so or in the area. So I kind of inspired myself with that. It's not the easiest place for a creative person to be, but it kind of, like a desert flower can flower because it's in the desert. So kind of think of it like that. I've got a kind of a love-hate relationship with Port Elizabeth, but I've got great friends there, and it's got beautiful beaches, and it's just got a very special place in my heart. And of course, I ran my business designing communication materials and training materials in the area, so we'll talk a bit more about that and how it influenced my writing.
Yes, indeed, because a lot of your work, as I understand it, when you were doing the communications work, was related to humanitarian causes, things like training materials relating to the HIV and AIDS epidemic. Also, you looked at things like integrity and diversity, helping workplaces with that. Obviously, very, very hot topics everywhere, but particularly in South Africa with South Africa's recent history. So just tell us a little bit about that. I mean, what drew you in particular to these humanitarian causes?
Well, I've always been a bit of a do-gooder, I suppose. Well, my mom always says to me, I'm trying to fix the world, and I think if you're wired that way, that's just how you're going to be. And I got involved in designing the training materials when a good friend of mine, Charles, asked me to give it a bash, and I got going with the VW project. And from then, I just kept on getting clients and covering a vast number of workplace issues, including, I decided that HIV/AIDS was going to be a hot topic, and it did become one. And so I designed the course, and it was quite popular. And I got involved also in running. I started a trust for HIV affected kids as well. Look, it sounds very grand, but it was more like just hard work. The little haven is still going now. Yeah, so I've always been involved in stuff. You know, we got involved in Dave, actually, who's in the green room, making sure that this all goes smoothly. Thank you, Dave.
Yes, thank you, Dave.
Oh, gosh. If we start shouting at Dave, you know we're talking. Dave was also involved, helped a lot with our anti-nuclear little group that we started to educate people about that in Port Elizabeth. So yeah, I've always, it's informed my writing quite a lot as well. You know, my short stories that I haven't published yet, a lot of my poetry is socioeconomic angle as well. Yeah.
And now you're in the UK, and in fact you're involved in caring. Tell us a little bit about that, how you came to come to the UK and come into the job that you're doing now.
Well, I got to a point where, because when I got divorced, obviously it's traumatic, I suddenly found that I had to make a decision, take my business and make it really fly, or make a break and write, which is what I really wanted to do. And of course, as you know, it's not easy to make a living as a writer just like that. So I ran out of money, and so I decided to come and do the caring, partly because it's an easy job to get into if you're a certain type of person in the UK. It's a good foothold, and I really enjoy it. If I could carry on caring and not have to worry about the fact that I really want to be a writer, I wouldn't have a problem with the actual job. It's lovely. I really enjoy it, but the writing is my passion, and my real goal is to be able to dedicate all my time to it.
And I imagine every poet writes from their life to a large extent. Obviously, imagination comes into it too.
Of course, at least the triggers of life triggers. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so your own poetry is expansive in the sense that, certainly in this collection, your poems seem to touch on a number of areas in your life, as you said, the sort of socio-economic, political poetry, although again, not overtly so, in the sense that when you read the poems, you don't feel like you're having a finger wagged at you. You don't feel like you're having your ear bashed.
No. And that's because it comes, the process of writing a poem for me is for want of a much better word, a spiritual experience. You know, poems, some of them just arrive just like that, and you go, oh my God, it actually, you know, not to rate yourself, but, you know, wow, thank you. And some poems just, I mean, the other day I was on the phone, I was on hold to the doctor's rooms, and I suddenly looked over and I had this thought and went, oh my God, scribble, scribble, scribble. And later when I read what I'd written to my good friend Bill Knight, he said, oh, I think that's one of your best poems ever. And I was like, really? I just wrote. But then sometimes I'll go a whole year and I won't have a poem. So it's very much it's a very humbling and a humble process for me. Maybe for other people it's not. Some, you know, each poem, I really believe they become their own being at some point, definitely. They kind of take over, and they do arrive in the middle of the night. And if you don't get up right now and write it, it's gone. Goodbye, you know.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it, how some poems arrive almost fully formed. They just sort of pop into your head. Whereas others, you gradually, you perhaps find and try to capture a feeling or a scene, and then you gradually build on that. Or
like all relationships, really.
Yes. Tell us about your relationship with words, because obviously for a poet, words are the thing, and your words are deftly expressed, lots of variety, lots of texture. Tell me about your relationship with words.
My relationship with words, it's like somebody said, a lot of people say to me, how do I become a writer? How can I be a writer? Yeah, downloads are a gift. You're right, Sarah. You call it a download. You're right. It's like there's, you know, people say like, where can I get inspiration? Where can I get purpose? It's all there. It's like this Wi-Fi. You just have to want it. You've got to reach out and pull it, and you've got to say to life, yes, whatever that means for you. I can't remember. What was your question?
I was just asking about your relationship with words. So yes, you can be fairly tangential with that answer.
Yeah. The point is, when people say to me, how do I become a writer? You know, why do you want to be a writer? It's like, as again, my friend Bill says, he says, do you have the fever? You know, if you you know, it's not a question you ask a writer. Why do you want to be a writer? It's more a question of you can't not be one.
Yeah.
It's like the Godiverse. I call it the Godiverse because the religious overtones of God and universe sounds too impersonal. So I've got this new word, Godiverse, very real, very active, very involved entity, love, purpose, all that stuff. You just have to want it. It's there. It's like a candy store, and you can take whatever you want, as far as I'm concerned. Sometimes when I've got an issue that I feel strongly about, I'll say, I really would like a poem for that, or a story, and then I'll leave it. I'll just leave it, and maybe a year later something will arrive. It's got to be original. It's got to be entertaining. It's got to be real. It can't be finger wagging. That's
Nobody likes to be lectured, definitely.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, yes, indeed. And as well as this compulsion to write, I think, like many writers, there's also a compulsion to share your words, to communicate. And then we come into the idea of collecting together your own collection, your own anthology, and publishing it yourself, which is hard work, I have to say, from what I know the process. So tell us a little bit about how, you know, the paperback edition, the ebook edition of Flotsam and Jetsam, A Half-Life of Poems, how it came into being.
Well, the poems I've been writing over 20 years. Some of them crafting as I go. You know, you grow, you learn, and you go, oh, you know what? I'm going to take that word or that comma out because it doesn't quite fit. You have to be a little OCD for the stuff, I'm afraid. And then like a year later, you'll come back and you'll be reading it and your brain is still seeing that other word and you'll just put it back again. You know, I think there was, I don't know who it was who said, you know, I took a comma out this morning and put it back. Was it Hemingway or whatever? It's like that kind of thing, because it's very important how it's on the page. Even though I'm a big fan of, yeah, Sarah, you're right. I'm a big fan of the post-structural idea. I don't know if it was Roland Barthes, whoever it was, who basically, look, it's obvious, but he said that the process of creating a text or a work is only complete once it's been read, because it's going to be read differently by every single person. Different people, I've said to them, which is your best poem or your couple of best, which poems do you think I should read for my launch? And everybody's got a different idea of what speaks to them. So just the power of words is just phenomenal. We need to take that more seriously in today's world, I believe.
Oh, it certainly is. And it looks like we're getting a few requests for certain poems on the screen. Wildflowers came up. Yeah. So I don't know, maybe Lana will take a request or two towards the end to read them out. But we're certainly going to read
all this stuff. Dave's going to have to.
Yeah. Wildflower you've been asked for by Catherine. She would like to hear that. So I imagine we can come to that at some point later.
Yeah, we could. It's just that I've already done it on my YouTube, but I could do it again. Let's see.
There you go. You can have Lana on her YouTube. You've got a channel, have you, Lana?
I do. I've just started it. I can't promise to be prolific because I'm a bit, I'm just like, oh, do I have my kids tell me, you have to do this stuff. You have to promote yourself. That's the thing about self-publishing. No one's going to do it for you. It's like, oh my God, do I have to do Twitter? No, I'm not doing Twitter. I'll do Instagram, maybe. And Instagram is quite nice because I keep Instagram for my little quickie, what I call padcourse. In South Africa, we have this word padcourse, which means road food, when you know, going on a long trip. And there's just little poems that I write when I'm sort of walking along, or a thought that comes to me, but it's not the poems, you know. So Insta is quite cool.
The poems, like it. Well, without further ado, let's consider some of the poems. I enjoyed very much reading the collection, as I mentioned just now, wide-ranging from the intimate to the more global, if you like, in terms of the topics and the subjects that you pick up on. And this, I thought, was a particularly powerful poem, and it relates, I think, in some respects to your work with the aftermath of HIV and AIDS, and also resonates particularly loudly now with the current situation with the COVID-19 pandemic. And that is a poem which, for the purposes of the launch, we're calling Burial Ground. And I just thought it was very powerful. So tell me a bit about Burial Ground, and then we'll hear it in a minute.
Yeah. So as I said, I worked and lived in Port Elizabeth. Now that's just okay. So what happened was, what actually happened was, I wanted to do a poem, a painting. I do paint as a hobby, and there was an exhibition that was being held, and I wanted to do it. I had this thing and bee in my bonnet. I was going to do a poem. So I drove around Port Elizabeth looking for images to stoke my imagination, and I drove past. We drove past Motherwell Cemetery, which is these couple of pictures I took here. And I looked at these little white, Dave, if you just do the close-up, you can see the little white squares. And that's what they give to people who can't afford a gravestone. And it's just so sad. It's just a piece of plastic. And when I was doing the training, the HIV training, I spoke to a lot of people, and obviously getting involved in the trust as well. The loneliness of having HIV. South Africa's got the biggest HIV epidemic in the world. It's such a lonely disease. And of course, COVID hadn't even happened. That ramps up the loneliness even more. But it was lonely because of the stigma, for all sorts of reasons that I won't go into now. But people would turn you, we have a blame culture. South Africa particularly is very much a blame culture. And it's hard to have HIV because your family can turn against you. Everybody thinks you're loose. It's a very, very sad disease. And when I saw this, I had this image, because Port Elizabeth is also very windy. It's called the Windy City, and people who don't want to be reminded of that call it the Friendly City. Of course, it's very, very windy. Cape Town's more windy, but PE is more windy for longer months of the year. And had this image of all these little squares flying away, because of course a lot of these graves will be HIV deaths. And then I had this idea of the people, the deaths, being kind of soldiers for humanity, for our humanity, to say, please see that I'm suffering and don't stigmatize me. I read an article the other day that Motherwell Cemetery, ironically, is struggling terribly with the COVID deaths, which kind of, adds to the whole thing. But the biggest challenge is stigma, and that was the inspiration for this poem. Had this idea of these little squares flying away, and them being kind of soldiers for humanity.
Right. So I think by the magic of Dave, we're going to hear
Dave's magic wand. Dave.
Magic of Dave. We're now going to hear Lana. She's recorded herself reading this one. We will do some live ones as well. But to Dave, over to you. We're listening.
Burial ground. You sailed away in an unmarked grave, a flailing speck on history's wave, back across that sea. I saw you, invisible, brave, your every breath precious to me. Poison cross, grit steel grin and a flag, flying high with the soul you gave to join the ranks. HIV. Rank and defiled, forgotten remnants of a discarded age, cheeks smooth as ancient thorns that MPs trod, blood dripping for their nation, who listen, even now, through the ancestors' wind. Tears slow as stalactites, hands cracked from salty drips, holding on with bitter pride. In a dream, marching across the plains, assegais thrust to the sky, leathered feet a dance, stampeding drought-hard bushes that scatter the graves, that ebb you away on that cold blood sea. Shards of starlight slice your faces, but your faces, they shine through the fog of collective forgettery. I smile, lifting my hand, but you're all caught up as one, hauling your strength from under the magnet of death. Holocaust-thin rib cages rise, brandishing decrepit arms, claiming blade by retching blade the nubs of our humanity. All this, I tell you, I see. But really, I just wish you were here, with me.
poem. It really is. Strong imagery. Sends a shiver down the spine, actually. Yeah, so hearing yourself reading that, it allows you to take a small step back from it in a way. What are your thoughts, just out of interest?
My thoughts were, Dave, the words aren't going with my voice. Where the fuck are you?
Apart from that, about the content.
You mean, what do I think of it standing
Yeah.
back from it?
Yeah.
I think it's a damn fine poem.
Quite right too. So you should. It is a very fine poem. Yes, in a way, it speaks of itself. Yes, it speaks of itself. So you mentioned before the reading that the idea of warriors, the assegai, which obviously speaks to the indigenous cultures in that part of Africa. How long did it take you to write that poem? Was it something that happened over a long time?
Okay, so every poem's different. Like every child that you have, you can say they got the same parents, but they're completely different, right? It kind of came to me mostly all at once with this idea of the flying. Because remember, I'd gone looking for a picture for a painting and got the idea for the painting. It's actually half finished, sitting in my storage in Cape Town. And so I've got these flying pieces of plastic, but the poem kind of came with it. And I would say that it's one of those was pretty much written all in one go, and then I've tweaked it a little bit as I've gone. Like as we said, I changed the title just the other day and called it Burial Ground instead of cemetery, because I just thought it was more sort of a nod to the indigenous aspect as well,
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And there's a lot more I could say about it, but we're not going to go and write a thesis now.
Absolutely. And I think, of course, with poetry is that for every reader or listener of poetry, the poem conveys different meanings, and the meanings that you've had or intended to convey, once,
Absolutely.
Of course, it leaves you and reaches a listener, and here's Roland Barthes and Co. again.
It's on its own life.
Exactly, it does. So everybody will get something different. So we're not going to sit here and dissect it line by line. No,
not so much.
But,
I actually really like leaving, poetry by its definition is ambiguous. It's meant to be. That's why it's exciting. It flirts with the edge between meaning and meaninglessness, and some poets take that right to the edge, but it still signifies. So it's definitely one of those marriages between if a novel is a marriage between a reader and a writer, then a poem is more like an illicit fling. It's like, I'm reading this poem and I'm getting so much out of it. It's a very sexy genre, I think, because you can read yourself into it, and we do. And that's why I have this little rule with myself. I never put a comma at the end of a line. It's not allowed, because I want the reader to decide for themselves whether they want to just read on to the next line and then stop, or whether they want to end there. So I love that idea of different meaning. I get different meanings out of my poems by reading them differently, which I find very interesting too.
That's, really interesting, actually, to say that. I'm just thinking, I might have to save a bit of that for our GCSE and A-level poetry classes at school. Thank you. Now, I'm going to ask a question at this point, who's been listening, because first answer that goes in the chat on Facebook.
This is an easy one.
And this is dead easy, come on.
I'm actually
so if you want a free copy of the paperback version of Lana's collection of Flotsam and Jetsam, then have your fingers poised over the keyboard for the answer to this question, which is this. Okay. What is the name of the city where Lana lived when she wrote the poem Burial Ground, the poem we just heard? What was the name of the city in which Lana lived when she wrote it? We've mentioned it several times, so go on, quick on the draw, and we'll come back towards the end and find out who got that. So good luck. Okay, let's move on. Another poem.
Have we got any questions or anything that we want to answer?
Oh, somebody's put it up very fast. Oh, we've got a few.
No, not East London. I saw it.
Yeah, somebody's got it. Well done, Catherine. Okay, I'm game.
Catherine. She said East London.
I know. We've got some good answers coming through. We'll let Dave can see the Facebook page. We can't see it at the minute, so Dave will see who was first. So well done, everybody. Anyway, good to know that you're all paying attention. Back to the collection. Let's move on to another poem. This is a poem I picked out. It's one of the shortest poems, if not the shortest. And I think in some respects that's part of the reason I picked it, not just because, you know, I'm being lazy about the number of words, but just because with poems, I'm always full of admiration for poems that encapsulate in a few lines something, and I think this one does that. And it's called Peacetime, and I'll read this one, and then Lana, let's hear from you a little bit of insight into your thoughts when you were writing this. So, Peacetime by Lana Honeyball. The jagged edge of peace cuts deep, twists its stiletto heel into the wound of the forgotten soldier, then twists again. For certain, it was his last summer, lying half rotted already, cold pain sweating, alone, but for the hope his death might bring. There you are, Peacetime by Lana Honeyball. A very short poem, but says an awful lot, actually. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites too. I have a visceral antipathy to this over consumerism that we live in, which completely basically says to the people who've sacrificed their lives, not only their lives by dying, but their lives that they've dedicated to our freedom in whatever form. So whether it's the mess that's being made of post-apartheid South Africa, which is basically a finger to the people that sacrificed themselves to get that freedom. And I do have one poem in particular that talks to that, a couple actually. It just really gets to me. The poem on the next page, which I'm not going to read today, called Still Life, takes that theme and takes it right into the home, into that sort of stagnant, marriage, battle of the sexes kind of thing, and I've kind of brought that in. But anyway, I got the idea when I was humming Let's Twist Again. Let's twist again like we did last summer. And I just thought, I saw this image of the stiletto heel going into the wound of the forgotten soldier, because I thought, you just don't appreciate what people have done for you, you little XYZ culture. And that's that. And it also arrived pretty much intact like that. And I was very grateful. I feel as if a writer, an authentic artist, any artist who's authentic, is kind of, and this is a Marxist thought actually, is commissioned by society to be the mirror and to be the conscience, to be the stoker, the prodder, and also just the joy.
Yes, because if you're going to share your writing, you have a responsibility, really. I mean, by means of your writing, to shed a light on certain things, to offer people suggestions of things they might not have otherwise thought about, to broaden horizons. I mean, there's so many things that writers have a responsibility to do, and it doesn't have to weigh heavy, but I think in a way you're giving a message, aren't you? And what I thought was interesting about this was you could feel the intensity of that anger that's coming from you, but also the very last line, just you end on a more uplifting note. You use the word hope, and although it's hope which is also in the same line as the word death, there is a hope, and it sort of says deaths are not in vain. And that's one of the nice things. It's a short poem, isn't it? But you do transmit a lot of different emotions, from, you know, fairly negative ones, I guess, to something like this, which ends on a more positive feeling.
Thank you. I see Catherine says she won't make me breakfast. Now, Catherine's a good friend of mine, and the image I have of her is us sitting on her couch, you know, with cups of cocoa in the cold Cape winter, busy dissecting each other's poems and saying, oh, I think that could be better. I think that line is a little bit weak. And, you know, so she put East London by mistake, and she's like, I will not make you breakfast. So hello, Catherine, I see you.
Fair enough. She was
the
secret Sassoon to your Wilfred Owen or whatever. Question 2. Who was paying attention then? Because we've got a second question. Lana, do you want to ask question 2, or shall I?
Oh, I hope I can read it.
Have you got it handy? Because I've got it handy if you haven't.
Yeah, I'll read it. Okay. What part of the shoe is the jagged edge of peace that twists into the wound of the forgotten soldier?
There you go. What part of the shoe is, quote, the jagged edge of peace that twists into the wound of the forgotten soldier? So hands quick on the keyboard if you want a free paperback copy of Lana's lovely collection, Flotsam and Jetsam. And Lana, there is something I wanted to ask you before we move on to another poem, which is the illustrations. Tell me about the illustrations, because there's some lovely pencil illustrations, aren't there?
Yeah, well, I do like to draw and paint. So I decided to draw them, and I wanted to have the collection in a loose metaphor of sea and beach and soul birthing. Not all the poems relate to the sea or whatever, so it's kind of a loose metaphor, but I thought I could hold it together a bit better by bringing together some things, you know, from the beach that one might pick up along the way. And in my in my preface, I do have a little bit of my theory about poetry, and I hold it together with that beach sea theme, you know.
Yes, creative expression has obviously always been important to you, hasn't it, throughout life? I mean, you do, as you say, talk about this in the introduction to the collection, but obviously you're something of a visual artist as well as somebody who makes shapes with words. Tell us about.
Well, my mom is an artist. I would have got that from her. She's a most excellent artist, and we grew up with art and with creative expression and all that sort of thing. So that was a real gift.
When it came to putting the book together, just interested here, because I think you've used the Amazon print on demand and publishing service. Is that right? Yeah. So was that just a case of you had to upload sort of photographs of your pictures and so on to how did the process come about? Just a couple of minutes on that.
The thing is, okay, on one hand, anyone can publish. All you've got to do is be determined. It's all there. All the tools are there. You go onto Amazon. I know there's a big debate about Amazon and blah, 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 but you know what? That's a separate debate. Right now.
We're not going to get into that now.
No, we're not going to get into that. It's what we have. You have something to say. You're prepared to work hard to say it well. Don't be lazy. And you're prepared to do a bit of marketing and stuff. All you need is access to the internet, and you can publish. So so I did that, and it wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. It's quite a learning curve, and I don't even think I've really even started the learning curve. There's still a lot more. I mean, you listen to stuff and got words you don't understand, all this marketing stuff, and I'm like, actually, I don't know. But in terms of publishing itself, it's really easy if you are prepared to dive in and get to grips with the process. It's all there. It's all there for the taking, but it's a learning curve. So essentially, you write your book, you make sure it's as good as it can be, and that can take a couple of years. You know, you decide I wanted to illustrate it. Are prints available? Well, I suppose if I could think about that.
Well, they could be available, perhaps, if there's a demand, I'm sure.
No. You know, the wonderful thing about technology now, especially with print on demand, is that I, as the author, publisher, I don't have to go and have a warehouse full of books. There's some limitations. You can't have embossing and you can't have that fancy look or, special paper and all that. But right now, beggars can't be choosers. If this is these are the tools I have right now, these are the tools I'm going to use. I'm not going to keep putting it off until whenever. And so, yeah.
It's the democratization of publishing, really, isn't
Absolutely.
it? And obviously, for the consumer, finding the quality is the tough part, because, as you say, anyone can publish if they've got the gumption to get on and do it. But whether or not the stuff they want to publish is that great is another matter.
Yeah.
Thankfully, in your case, there is definite quality here and a lot of it. So congratulations. It's a really professional collection. It's wonderful. Let's move on to another poem now. And this is another one that I picked out, and it's more intimate. I mean, the previous two had more, socio-political messages, if you like. But this one is more intimate. And I think it resonated with me because it relates to an experience that an awful lot of us have had. It's called I Remember. And it relates to that awkward time when a relationship is just not working anymore. And as I suspect most of us have felt that at one time or another. Unfortunately, it's a bit part of life, really. Tell me a bit about this one, and then I think we're going to hear you read that one live, aren't we, Lana?
No, we've got to go the other way around. We recorded this one, and then we can talk a little bit about it. And then the one I was just going to read loud was Word. Okay, got it. Or whatever people want. I mean, I don't know. I probably won't read Wildflower again because I did it on the YouTubes. Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
There you go, Catherine. You just have to go to YouTube for that one. All right. Well, in that case, let's hear the recording of I Remember, and then we'll talk about that, and then we'll hear Word. Okay. Dave, the magic of Dave, whenever you're ready.
I remember that one once you were real, but not the world. Your hand lay next to the empty cup. I floated in a surreal dream, but it was real, your hand. I could simply have shifted a tiny bit, then calloused and hewn with vitreous time. The soft underflesh of yours would have been on mine, but I didn't. The coffee shop was full of people, and my life with reality, where dreams push in like climate change, unwanted, unstoppable, overwhelming, and things can never be the same.
Thank you. Again, a powerful piece. It's intimate. It talks about a very everyday experience, but at the same time, there's an awful lot going on under the surface. And I think this is where poetry can be so resonant, because poetry is able to deliver with the choice of words, the choice of spaces, the choice of punctuation, the more intense feelings that lurk behind an everyday experience. So tell us a little bit about this one.
Well, this is actually, it wasn't about the relationship not working. It was, it's about having, I had the most amazing serendipitous, my life just works according to some serendipitous principle. And I used to think everybody's must surely be the same. They're just not listening hard enough, but I don't know. But I won't go into it now, maybe when I write my memoirs or whatever, but there was an incredible serendipitous sort of number of events that led to me having coffee with my first real boyfriend that I'd ever had. And it really just came out of that. And it was just an opportunity for us for closure and for us to, to just clarify, what actually happened there. No, actually, you know what, you saw it that way. I didn't actually reject you. I thought you rejected me, that kind of a talk. It was just nice. Neither of us was wanting to be in that relationship anymore at all. We're both on our own paths, but it was nice to just have that moment. And it's about that moment. And I think we're all living a lot more in each moment than we realize. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, a relationship that broke down in the past and then reflected on in a calmer moment, then perhaps. But yes, it says a lot. It says a lot in a simple, a deceptively simple portrayal of an everyday.
And everybody will get what they need from it, you know.
Very much so. And in fact, we have a question, don't we? We have a question.
We do.
Question number 3 for a copy of the paperback book. We've got 3 going.
Oh, that question. I thought you meant
and signed. I forgot to add that part earlier. Lana's going to sign it, so you get a signed edition.
Woo,
yay! Okay. Are we ready? Fingers poised on the keyboards for the last chance to win a free copy of the paperback of Flotsam and Jetsam. And this is the question. In what type of shop do we find the 2 ex-lovers featured in the poem I Remember? In what type of shop do we find the 2 ex-lovers featured in the poem I Remember? There we go. Put your answers in the chat, and whoever gets the first will get it.
Boy.
I think it could be Charles. Well done. Well done.
Oh,
they're coming in thick and fast.
Charles is one of my favourite people too. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so another poem. We've got another poem that you wanted to read to us. Words. Tell us a bit about words.
Sorry, that's my sister's sex job. Oh, you're so funny, Charles. Well, you know what? Coffee. Would you like to come round for coffee? I mean, we know.
Yeah. Coffee's got a lot of
Shall we just have a coffee? Shall we just? It's just coffee, okay? Stop already. Yeah. Okay. You know, this started when I thought, I wouldn't mind reading the poem that kind of talks to peacetime, and which is still life. And then I thought, maybe a little dreary. Not dreary, no, none of them are dreary. A little negative in the context of the collection, which is a journey. So I thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to read Word. This is about words. Word. Once upon a deep breath, one exquisite inhalation, and then upon the fair wind of satisfied release, there chanced upon a thought, upon a life so fleeting, through the finite tenderness of one moment in repose, a word. Couched in half an eggshell, afloat a sea of air, its tiny canvas groans, bucks and jewels the unkind swells of its forebears mounting wit. Walls of jade stared dry-eyed down, and then, oh mercy, mutiny within. The vessels hurled, china cup against tyrant's fist, but hold strong between intention and the fair listener's ear. Waiting, as a lover's not been met, a child's frantic search in a sea of hands, a soul's waking to life's fragile call, that single thread of which sanity's composed. See there, a lighthouse casts its faithful glow, lest the word founder on rocks jagged from antiquity. It bears down for one last push, bolstered by what's unspokenly agreed. Eyes catch in fishing nets. Land ahoy! This frail boat's weathered doldrums that suck wind like a gossiper's tongue braved the force of its own heart's vortex and found shade against the sun. Now, and with a sigh, it docks, births the silky folds of a synapsed pledge, and the next moment is born.
Lovely. Thank you, Lana. I think that poem kind of says it all, really, doesn't it? It says an awful lot about the whole business of poetry and creating pictures with words, and for which big congratulations on this, your first collection.
Yeah.
And before we finish, let's just look ahead a little bit. Any more plans? You haven't stopped writing just because you've published a collection. Where do you see this taking you next?
Well, if the whole world buys my book, I can stop caring and I can just write. That would be a good start. Because that does slow things down, especially at my age. No, I've got a novel which I've been working on for a long time, and I want to finish it because all the things that I was talking about 20 years ago are starting to happen around us, and I'm like, oh, I better get a wiggle on. But it's still it's a decent story. I have some short stories that I'm almost ready to publish, which I'll probably do in the next while. And I also have a kind of a poem story thing that I love so much. And it's called The Village of Noughts. And I approached a well-known illustrator to ask if it illustrated, because it'll be more like a picture book. And he said he loves the idea, he'd love to do it, but it needs to be shorter. And he gave me what the publishers want. And I've tried really hard to start editing it to half the size, and I'm just killing it. So I don't want to kill it. So that's my next dilemma, is how to approach all of that. So yeah, I'm working on quite a few things, lots of ideas for short stories written in big books of scribbled notes, which I am very eager to get to. You go through phases of, intense creativity where you hide away from the world and you do everything. And that's the luxury that you're really after as a writer, aren't you? But at the moment, I'm in a sort of like survive in the world of economic necessity phase.
Yeah, I think we can all sympathise with that situation. It's finding the balance, isn't it? Well, thank you very much. It's been an absolute privilege to be involved in the launch of your collection. I've really enjoyed reading the poems, and please do, as we've said already, please go and download Lana's book. You can download it for free until Friday. And in return, Lana would love it if you could publish a review on Amazon, ideally a very, very gushingly wonderful, enthusiastic review, but obviously it's up to you what you say.
No. Honest and truthful and authentic goes down much better. Dave, that's the wrong slide, dude. It's got to be the
honest and truthfully enthusiastic.
Yeah. And can I just say thank you as well, because I'm really, really grateful to you, Kate. We met through Litopia. You just offered to do this out of the goodness of your heart, and I just really appreciate it. And thanks to Dave and just everybody who's helped me on my journey till now. I know for a fact that nothing like this happens in a vacuum. I don't believe it for a second. I think we need each other more than we realize. And it's hello. It's Dave. Hello. And thanks everybody who listened. I really appreciate that. And share if you can, and review if you would like. And thank you. It's been a pleasure. And in the same way that it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a community to create a work of a collection of poetry or a written work. There you go. So fantastic. Yeah. Good luck with this. You. Thank you so much. So please go to Amazon. You can just put Lana's name in the search bar and you'll find it. I tried it out earlier and it works just like that. It's really easy to find, comes straight up. Yeah. So paper book and ebook form via Amazon. Also, there's a link on Lana's website as well, which is a very nice website, I have to say, very professional looking. So do go and check that out as well. I must say that was designed by Reino from Veya, and it's an absolute, I just love the website. I'm very, very grateful. So if anyone wants a really cool website design, they can contact me and I'll put you in contact with him. Yeah, seconded. It looks fantastic. I have to say thank you for all the wonderful messages that you've been sending to Lana for the launch. We've been seeing them across the screen, and it's lovely to know that we're not just talking to ourselves and that you're listening and supporting. And I'm sure Lana really, really feels that close to her heart. So it's been a pleasure, Lana. Thanks for inviting me to be a part of your journey. And good luck on the next step. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Goodbye. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye.